Hi, I'm Greg Jeffers, and this is the Flyover Land podcast. It's been a busy week here at Freesong Farm. We rounded up our rams for a very late spring roundup. Had a neighbor of mine come over because we had to pull 62 rams out of the herd, and they wouldn't cooperate and get on the trailer, as you might imagine. Now, this man was in his 50s. I'm in my 60s, and he was kind enough to come over here, and it was only 90 degrees out and the sun was beating us to death. And he took half and I took half, and we dragged those 150-pound animals from our barn onto the trailer. That's community. But today's talk is not necessarily about community as it is about the building blocks of community, and that is children, the production of children within a intact home and a stable home, and one that is going to remain stable until the children are adults. And what I mean by stable until they're adults, I also mean that the highest probability that both parents will survive until the youngest child is an adult. So listen to these clips and then we'll get into it.
I did not interview men for the first 4 years of my study. And it wasn't until a man looked at me one day after a book signing and said, "I love what you have to say about shame. I'm curious why you didn't mention men." And I said, "I don't study men." And he said, "That's convenient." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you say to reach out, tell our story, be vulnerable. But you see those books you just signed for my wife and my 3 daughters?" I said, "Yeah. They'd rather me die on top of my white horse than watch me fall down." When we reach out and be vulnerable, we get the shit beat out of us. And don't tell me it's from the guys and the coaches and the dads. Because the women in my life are harder on me than anyone else.
There's an evolutionary biologist named Jason Wilder who had done some incredible research. He unwound the human genome, and long story short, he determined that we have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. And they guesstimated it. This is not hard. They guesstimated that 80% of the women who've ever lived and only 40% of the men who have ever lived left behind DNA. Now, it could have been 70-35, it could be 60-30, but they guesstimated at 80-40. Well, so only 40% of the men who ever lived were appealing enough to leave behind genetic material. Of that 40%, there is a distribution. And I think it's probably a Pareto distribution, the law of the trivial many and the critical few. And using that, it would mean that 20% of the 40% left behind 80% of the genetic material. Said another way, only 8% of the men who have ever lived left behind 80% of the genetic material, male genetic material that we carry in our bodies today. And that is 92% left only 20% of the genetic material that we have. The world is a cold and cruel place, and these are the rules that men have to contend with. Men have been in a battle for progeny since we climbed out of the trees, and actually long before then. As civilization progressed, the battle became one for not just survival, but reproduction, again for progeny, and eventually for some for glory. But there is no sympathy. Men don't get sympathy sex. Men must become something in order to become appealing. They must be winners, and they must accrue benefits, assets, resources, status, or they're yanked out of the gene pool.
Most men will only experience unconditional love from their mothers, and some of us don't even get that. Most of us have never even felt appreciation or respect without conditions or hidden intentions. We don't know what it sounds like to hear, "I see you, and I'm proud of you. I'm glad you're here." You really make a difference, yet the expectation is to constantly be displaying the strength and love that the world is hesitant in conveying. We're expected to have a thick skin but get judged if it turns to a hard shell. The first step in being a man is ignoring the hunger. Because yes, boy, you're going to be starving. Starved of attention, starved of affirmation, starved of love, starved of being told that you are enough. Step 2 in being a man is comfortability with replaceability. You are only as good as you are useful. You are only as valuable as you are needed by others. Should there ever come a day, boy, where you fail to provide everybody with a smiling face, then do not be surprised when they say all men do is take up space.
My response to that pity party is, ready? 1, 2, 3. Wah. Wah. It's not easy being a man. These are the rules and you have to overcome. How much fight do you have in you? Right? Some people are not going to leave any genetic material behind. They're not going to have children. They're not going to succeed. It's a battle for success and for progeny. You have to show up in the best possible condition for the battle and strive to win. I can't change. There's nothing that we could do as a community, as a family, as a church group to change that reality. We can soften the blow for people who are incapable and are suffering, but we cannot change the rules without running out of babies. And that's what's happening now. Hold on. Buckle up, because this is going to hurt.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is Psych Hacks, Better Living Through Psychology. All things being equal, whether a woman desires sex and or a relationship from any given man depends on 2 factors: his value and his attractiveness. Value means things like his net worth, his social status, and his lifestyle. Attractiveness means his physicality, his sexiness, and his swagger. We can visualize these in a 2x2 Punnett square like so. As you can see, if you're an attractive, high-value man, women will likely desire a relationship with you, but if you don't want one, they'd be willing to offer you sex. On the other hand, if you are an attractive, low-value man, they'd be open to a sexual relationship. And if you're an unattractive, high-value man, they will be open to the possibility of a relationship, but sex will likely be an infrequent occurrence. And of course, men who are neither get nada. Make sense?
So rather than whine about the rules, the conditions of existence, we, or I, our organization, my church group, we try to encourage young men to not be in the bottom left corner, right? The portion of men who are unappealing, physically and otherwise unappealing, and have no status, no resources. They haven't succeeded anywhere, because there's no fixing that. The way you fix the problem for men is you become something. Now, we can't all be 6'2". You might be 5'7", but you can be in great shape. You can maintain perfect hygiene. You can be clean cut. You can dress cleanly and neatly. And you can be hardworking and highly conscientious. And that will go a long way to appealing, to making yourself appealing to women.
And I think we have to think of it from the man's point of view, because for a man, a relationship requires a lot of emotional effort and time. He has to invest emotional effort because women are emotional creatures, and for them to feel happy and supported in the relationship, they want a man's emotional presence. But see, for women, it's not a trade-off. We love spending time in relationships. We love giving up our time and giving your emotions. I think what women have to think about for a relationship is that a man's going to want sex. He's going to want sex and he's going to want cooking. But a lot of women slide on these factors.
On the other hand, men are not complicated creatures. They want a woman who brings them peace and not drama. They want peace in the home. They want sex in the bedroom, and they want to be fed. if their life is going to revolve around going out to restaurants, well, they're just going to pass on a wife and children. And that's what we've done. We've moved to the urban centers. We've passed on wives and children, and we eat in restaurants. And now we're 100 pounds overweight. And we have no children. So what can we do? Well, the absolute first thing we can do is to once again recognize that there are seasons to life. This 50 is not the new 30. There are seasons to life, and we are mortal.
You have to save our life when we can.
The lesson of the cherry blossom.
I love that scene. I'm married to a Japanese woman, and in Japan, they have this great lesson for young people, the lesson of the cherry blossom, and they tell it to baseball players and sumo wrestlers and to beautiful young women. You will blossom and you will bloom like a flower, and then you will shrivel up, and you'll hang on the branches for a lot longer than when you were in your full bloom, and then you'll fall to the ground and go and perish. The Chinese are even more brutal, far more brutal. They refer to a woman's 27th birthday, if she's not married, as leftover birthday cake. She's leftover birthday cake at 27. And it's a terrible, brutal, harsh thing to say, and perfectly accurate. Now compare the Japanese and Chinese example to the example of Americans and Europeans, especially coming out of our universities, where we tell our young people that age is just a number. You've got all the time in the world. No, you don't. You've got 70, and if by strength 80, and a few of us live beyond that. But here's another fun fact to know, or not so fun fact to know. Only 80% of us will live long enough to collect Social Security, which begins at 62. That means 20% of us didn't make 62. If you have your children in your 40s, 20% of those people's children will be orphans. This is unacceptable. And this is something I speak of because I'm an older parent. So far, I've gotten away with it. But maybe I won't. We'll see.
Everybody doesn't lie, cheat, or steal from their friends.
Yeah, they do. Maybe not as much as this guy, but if people told nothing but the truth, the world would probably burn down overnight.
Some people think it's burning now. Maybe if everybody didn't lie.
Oh, that is cute. Talking about your breasts. They always get perky when you're being painfully earnest. Truth. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? More truth. I only noticed because Chase was staring at them. He'd never admit it because he doesn't want to offend you. Same reason he'd never tell you that he's thought about having sex with you. Although, to be fair, every man you've ever met has thought about having sex with you. They'll lie, because if you knew, you probably wouldn't want to have sex with them. And that's just some of the lies from the last minute. And here's a bigger one. You already know this, but you pretend you don't because it makes you feel civilized. Most people find it easier to ignore the truth.
Sometimes, to get through life, you have to ignore the truth, stretch the truth, or oppose the truth. But when it comes to having children and the continuation of your family line and the continuation of your community, you have to accept the truth. And you have to accept that the truth is this, that you have a far, far smaller window to get this done than you've been led to believe. For young men, you've got to come out of the starting blocks like a maniac. You have a lot of things you've got to get done to make yourself appealing. And for young women, you come out of the starting blocks extremely appealing, but it fades a lot sooner than you'd like to believe, or that you've been led to believe. Or maybe you're just in denial. But there's a solution here, and we have to find it, or we're going to go out of business. Your family's going to die out, and you're going to have a very lonely and unpleasant old age filled with regret. And that's to be avoided at all costs. But that's enough for me today. I'm Greg Jeffers for the American Quaker Friends Church.